For this video, I want to focus on the humanity of 9/11. Conditions, perspectives, victims. Even if you already got all your mourning out in 2001, really put yourself behind all the victims' minds and bodies. Their skin, ears, eyes, noses, mouths. Get in tune with every sense that was activated on 9/11. A lot of what I'm going to reflect on is likely things you've already heard, seen, thought, felt, dealt with, or currently dealing with. But watch the whole thing and tell me I didn't hit a new nerve at some point along the way. Start with the passengers, the nitty-gritty, those who got a first-hand experience with the hijackers. Tens of thousands of feet in the air within a flying metal tube capable of causing claustrophobia. Think about that initial encounter. Who are these dudes? What are they about to do? Am I dying today? And the tragic realization after that of, I will be dying today. Even more tragic than that, I am dying. Think of the stabbings and mace sprays and whatever other methods of subduing took place. Think about the instance right before those planes hit the 3 buildings in Pennsylvania ground. And the impact happened so fast that you don't even need to think about how they felt when the planes actually hit, because they were already dead before exploding or burning to pieces. Are you the type to choose violence like the people that fought back against the hijackers on Flight 93? What's your move of choice? Kick, punch, bite, poke eyes, bear hug? What weapon can you grab nearby? Do you trust fellow passenger strangers to join you in the rebellion? How effective could you be in what was likely plane turbulence and threats caused by the terrorists on board? Are you considering that the people you're unfortunately having to touch with your bare hands might have harmful substances or bomb detonators on them? In a plane descending straight down at hundreds of miles an hour, all you can do is hang on to something trying to regain your balance, having to forget those hijackers that you were about to attack? Consider Flight 175 seeing hijacked Flight 11 speeding by in the air, less than 10 minutes before the North Tower got hit. They don't know what's happening at the time. They don't know that they're about to be involved in some rough times pretty soon. Many of us know what it's like when there's turbulence on a plane. It's a relatively quick annoyance that maybe even hurts your stomach a little, but you're able to keep doing what you were in the middle of. The 9/11 turbulence, particularly on Flight 93 over Pennsylvania, lasted a long time, longer than many TV shows, with no relief. You've probably dropped down a roller coaster or even a free fall ride at an amusement park. It's nowhere near a drop from tens of thousands of feet in the air at hundreds of miles an hour. You can't fasten a seatbelt tight enough for that type of ride. Let's go into the towers, where there were elevators that dropped a bunch of floors, some over 70 floors. Hearing the impact of planes hitting a tower, you got surrounding buildings and other areas catching strays of the tower and plane debris. Also in my thoughts is the juxtaposition of the different levels of emergency existing at the same time within the violated towers. And that goes for emergency within either tower. Lowest on the list are those that didn't even notice something was going on in the World Trade Center. Then those that felt a random trembling above them. Then everybody that was shifted along the floor. Those violently brought down to the floor. Those that watched the planes heading towards them firsthand. Those breathing newborn smoke. Those suddenly stuck in an elevator. Those plummeting down an elevator shaft or through the floors/ceilings or hit with debris or buried within it. Anyone whose body was rapidly starting to heat up unbearably from rising and then even hotter heat nearby. Next is those that were immediately set on fire from flames. And finally, coming full circle, those that likely felt and saw nothing since they were instantly evaporated by plane impact. I really didn't want to include too many visuals here, but I'll feature photos. So at least there's still room left for imagination, which is the goal of this video. People got to experience life in a vacuum, as in no air, due to all the smoke and heat of hundreds and hundreds of degrees. How much oxygen did you inhale, exhale today? People jumped out of buildings deprived of air and on fire onto concrete, etc. What's the most extreme inconvenience you've ever experienced? People went upstairs where people were coming down in full panic and scars and terror. Who have you sacrificed your life for today? People had to see other people splatter on the ground over and over again. How strong is your stomach? And much more. People had to strip in front of strangers to use clothing as a mask or a flag to wave and get attention. People had to watch what must have felt like mocking helicopters, staring back at them so close to being able to help, yet not being able to physically do so because of its blades and angle towards the buildings. People had to abandon other people to keep their own life meter running. And you likely forgot about the Pentagon. That would be a way easier jump with some notice from any level. But no advance warning. All you're left with is the last thing you ever did in your life. And then dying is the next activity you'll ever do. Reading comments of a video, someone made me really think. The quote unquote white splashes we saw when the planes hit weren't just debris. It was actually human beings. Like, really think about that. They were no longer skin, bones, none of that. Picture having 3 options of stairwells to go down within the towers, but 2 were not really an option due to the fire or just general uncertainty. And then having to choose one with smoke and the uncertainty of what you're even walking into. Having to run down 50 plus flights of stairs, and you don't even know how much time you have to get downstairs and out the building. The walls can completely cave in at any point. The stairs eventually became slippery from water that was coming down and eventually began flooding, slowing people down from walking. You got cold water soaking you from broken pipes. You're moving around in complete darkness, which might be the most underrated aspect of escaping the towers. There was a group in a dark stairwell that ended up at a dead end, but eventually realized there was an exit nearby to another stairwell. You also got people getting knocked unconscious from being hit by or into something. Who knows what people had to step or jump over. Burning objects, holes in the ground that could lead to death, blood, incapacitated and dead bodies, people with pre-existing conditions having to trek down from steps way up in the sky, elderly, people with asthma, various disabilities, those that gain new injuries. You had people with a lot of empathy caring for a pregnant woman, as well as a woman in a wheelchair ahead of their own safety, carrying and guiding them down all of the flights of stairs. You're dealing with other people panicking around you, screaming, crying, trying to bum rush their way past other people. You got people falling downstairs. Also, keep in mind, people were walking around with skin peeled off, flesh exposed, blood dripping from being burned or scraped by glass, scarred by other objects. You're experiencing the entire tower shake and rock and sway. You got the shaky structure of this building that you don't know if it's even going to last through this. People watching jet fuel pouring down with the fear of it igniting at any time from the flames. How about being bold enough to even risk getting into an elevator during such a confusing crisis? While I was looking at a collage of synced up collapse videos, I realized that looking uptown from the south side of the towers had to be the most terrifying because you can't really run away over there. You're at the bottom of downtown Manhattan, whereas there's plenty of space to run uptown on the north side of the towers. There was a man traveling down the south tower right after it was hit, explaining how he lost complete confidence in the structure that he was in. Put yourself into the view of a person mid-jump, dropping down to concrete and random objects on the street. Hearing objects and bodies hit the ground, as well as other objects. You hear a string of sound, just sounds like gunshots or little explosions. Some jumpers actually hit people. The first firefighter that was killed, Daniel Sir, actually died from someone landing on him after they jumped from the south tower. What a wild case of bad luck to be one of 6+ billion people in a 197 million square mile world on a random day in 2001. To be the one that broke someone's fall from the clouds. But all in vain, because they were likely already dead from the strongest breeze they ever felt hitting their face and stinging their body on the way down. Maybe even wilder than that was a man that climbed down the building by sliding and squeezing his body down structures of the tower before slipping down to his death after hearing and feeling the collapse of Tower 2. You gotta imagine how startling that noise must have been. And what really sucks is he didn't realize there was an available window nearby for him to climb through and maybe even reach the stairwell to get out the north tower. And apparently multiple people tried climbing down the tower in some way. Whether you're measuring in terms of bravery or desperation, that's the peak of it. There was another survivor, and I'm sure others, that had to use mental tricks just to get through. In this specific instance, this survivor didn't want to remove his jacket or his tie because to him, this was almost like admitting that something bad was happening and he couldn't escape it. Someone else was saying how we're in the same situation now ourselves as the people that we were just looking at across in the other building. That's some crazy, ironic, and surreal circumstance to be in. Another survivor made me consider how something as small as seeing a woman's shoe made him realize someone else is experiencing this with me. To me, there's a weird comfort yet doom in that moment, both at the same time, like some sort of metaphysical bonding or empathy taking place. Think about the people in either adjacent building with the view to watch everything unfold. Many not considering that they be next. Or imagine the stress of thinking that you actually will be next. You had a bunch of people thinking more attacks could be coming, particularly after the second plane crashed. You had a handful of sad voicemails and phone calls happening, going back to life inside of the tower. Imagine being trapped in Tower 1, watching Tower 2 fall. You had people that escaped being trapped in an elevator and then somehow being brave and desperate enough to take another one right after that. Like, imagine that anxiety. And sadly, you had people trapped in elevators as fire was on the other side of the doors. Some people trapped above the impact of the crashes likely dropped into a fire below them as the buildings were falling, if they were even still alive by then. Of course, we got to think about the people trapped at and above the impact floors with no real escape route. What a disappointment to scramble to the roof, anticipating rescue helicopters that never made it. You see people waving, like Edna Centron, holding on with all their might, with the hope of being rescued. And then you got the unfortunate people jumping or falling almost 100 stories to the ground. I noticed people squeezing through one window at the same time as one looked barely alive, maybe passed out from smoke or panic. Also reflect on how weird that is to be clinging onto a tower window while staring down at people that can't do anything for you, and vice versa, awkwardly staring back at them, not able to help. It's also eerie seeing building-sized smoke clouds as the towers collapse and knowing people were just in there living or dying a moment ago. Plus the fact that there are oblivious little kids crossing the street not that far away. You had people buried by debris, some that escaped, some that didn't. People crushed by an imploding building. A handful of survivors were trapped as much as a full day under dozens of feet of debris. You hear people's final moments like Kevin Cosgrove, who died frustrated waiting on the phone with an emergency operator as his building was collapsing. Operators were helpless too, just doing their best job to try and calm people. Imagine how heartbreaking and frustrating it is for them too. You can't ever forget about the firefighters, medical crews, police squads going through a normal day of work into an involuntary early retirement. How could you, as a firefighter, making as little as like $50 that day, or even nothing if you're just volunteering, how could you rush up into the height of a burning tower lugging pounds and pounds of equipment with no time to decide to even do it or not? How could you go towards a situation where there's thousands of victims inside and out that you only have two hands to save one at a time, if even that? Is that worth your time, your salary, your life? Are you selfless and generous enough? Are you still reporting when your world could end at any moment? And how can you stand directly in the eye of the storm, inhaling God knows what and doing God knows how much damage to your organs? Would you get up close to relay live footage and interviews? Ask yourself, are you selfless enough to fly a fighter jet potentially towards active kamikazes? Fearless enough to fly a helicopter nearby an active and burning crime scene? And then you got the lucky ones. Imagine running by someone that you think is about to die and walking out of Tower 1 into the smoke of the vanished Tower 2. And the same for the people that miraculously called out of work that day or otherwise avoided showing up for work at the World Trade Center. And anyone that could have offered assistance but was too scared or risk averse to do so. That could all be some heavy guilt. And remember that the families of victims are victims too. Think of knowing the way that your loved one might be suffering, and then ultimately knowing that they ended up dying that way. What are you saying to your son on one of those flights that's giving you the fatal forecast of his life, and all you can do is hold the phone? Why aren't you physically suffering instead of your loved one? Consider that there were kids and other types of dependents that relied on single parents and guardians to come back home that day. And not everyone was a high salaried exec or employee with a good paying job. There were cleanup people, entry-level workers, interns that really needed that 9/11 shift badly. There was no real choice for them not to show up or to leave work early. All those men that voluntarily boarded flights that they knowingly prepared to end in a fatal crash show some of the toxic effects of misusing peer pressure, religion, and national pride. Speaking of bin Laden, one final time, what the hell was even up with this goofy guy? Holding 20 plus year hate for Americans, communists, and anyone who wasn't his type of Muslim. Enough to put them and his followers in the worst danger. And actually, he kind of hated his followers too, to make them be the sacrifices and not himself. Why did he feel he gets to enjoy extra time on Earth while his minions go on a clueless, suicidal, misconstrued coin flip of a jihad? Wrapping this up, I just want to give thanks to all the relevant YouTube channels, the news stations, journalists, broadcasters, articles, websites, forums, photographers, videographers, visual effects artists, illustrators, helicopters, jet fighters, engineers, architects, investigators, agencies, and above all, the first responders and victims, both direct and indirect, as in the loved ones and traumatized spectators. My heart goes out to any person, place, or thing affected on and beyond 9/11. To anyone watching or listening to this, thank you for the time. I hope this positively affected you, ideally in an empathetic and compassionate sort of way. Continue to count your blessings and fortunes. Thanks for getting through all of this. Feel free to leave your thoughts below.